The history of manned spaceflight, the history of flight itself, is often traced to a narrow triangle within Ohio. It starts with the Wright brothers in Dayton figuring out just how to fly, runs to New Concord, hometown of John Glenn, the first American to orbit the Earth, and then crosses back to Wapakoneta, the small-town hometown of Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. But that triangle leaves out a critical link, the place in Ohio that tested and helped develop the propulsion systems that flew us to the moon.
We really do run under the radar.
And will now fly us back.
The awareness that we're doing it right here, right? That it's right here in Cleveland. Yeah, you drive by on 480 and you can see the buildings, right? And what's enabling us to go back to the moon is because what's coming out of NASA Glenn, right here in Cleveland.
It's been that way from the beginning. What today is NASA Glenn was first built in the early 1940s as part of the NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, helping develop engines for planes during World War II. Later, when the government decided the nation was going into space, the Cleveland facility became a key part of that effort.
I guess you could say that NASA maybe was even conceived here?
Cleveland's NACA facility had two influential leaders in aerospace, Abe Silverstein and Bruce London, both seen here in 1971, flanking Neil Armstrong. Back in the 1950s, Silverstein and London thought that any space agency should be a civilian agency and not part of the military, and that it should be built off the work done by the NACA. Their proposal was accepted, and NASA was born. And in Cleveland, that meant working and solving problems regarding engines that became increasingly more complex and daring.
As technology evolves, we went from piston engine, then to jet engine, and then to missiles, and then you turn that missile this way and all of a sudden it's a rocket.
We were always kind of like a propulsion laboratory, and so that's our area of expertise.
Lou Pavanelli should know. Lou is 88 years old and has been at NASA in Cleveland since 1960, where he still works today. And yes, he worked on the Apollo shots, including Apollo 11, that took man to the moon. Lou watched at home that night, July 20th, 1969, as Neil Armstrong first stepped foot
That's one small step for man,
on the moon.
one giant leap for mankind.
I said to my wife, "Hey, honey, without us, I wouldn't have done that."
Did you really say that?
Yeah.
Also watching that night, along with hundreds of millions of others,
And what they were able to do with the technology that was available at the time is miraculous.
was Mike Barrett. His mom had him watch the Apollo 11 landing, but Mike was just a toddler, too young to remember it. But he does remember Apollo 17 3 years later, the last mission to the moon that lifted off at night. At the time, Mike was just 5 years old. It's a memory that helped chart the course of his life.
That's what happened with Apollo, right? I was completely inspired to go into the technical field by what they'd done.
Today, Mike is the project leader of a team at NASA Glenn that will help power America's return to the moon.
This chamber right now is hosting NASA's newest electric propulsion technology, the one that we're planning on using to get back to the moon.
Developed at NASA Glenn, solar electric propulsion is a breakthrough technology, an extraordinarily efficient and powerful system that requires just a tenth of the fuel used in space by older propulsion systems. NASA's budget is about 1 penny for every $2 of federal spending, money that Mike Barrett believes is well spent.
We're a good value for the tax dollar in terms of what we produce, not only on the actual technologies, but on the inspiration.
Mike says the spin-off technologies themselves are many. Computers, for example, developed faster because of Apollo's push to get us to the moon, which is why it's hard to know what breakthroughs may be inspired by going back.
After Apollo, like I go out at night, right, in the summer in Cleveland anyway, and I look up and I say, well, we were there. I would like to see people to be able to go out and look up at the moon and say, we are there, right? And it's only the first step. We're going to go beyond that.
And when we do, that facility you see anytime you drive to the airport will play a big role, as it always has.
In the Cleveland consciousness, I'm not sure people realize how many advanced technologies are not only developed and tested here, but then we take them to flight.
And when NASA Glenn propels America's return to the moon, Mike will be excited. Both Mike, the project manager, and Mike, the little boy who watched Apollo with his mom.
That influence, right, that she inspired with me as well, and that 5-year-old boy is still there and wants to see us do it again.
We have done it before, go to the moon, thanks in part to NASA Glenn. And now, in 2024, we plan on doing it again. Bill Sheil, Fox 8 News.